So the other oh night, I was kind of spending my time too much in Skyrim. Um, but I had some videos off on the side that I was listening to, so I had added a bunch of videos to my watch later list, and this was one of them from Shad. So he basically kind of has a recording of him basically giving a talk to an online oh school, university, what have you, where he basically talks about oh how to achieve success. And there was a lot that I liked from it, in spite of like my lack of paying attention somewhat. There's a lot that he has that's rung very true, and also sometimes I feel like I'm lacking in, but at the same time I see that I'm still pushing myself toward. And that's kind of what inspired like this particular one, is like the idea that he puts forth on how to achieve your dreams. And I mean, really the most important part is like to have that dream full out. um I did try and get a paused frame where he looked a bit more glamorous, but each time it proved rather difficult. So, you just got the special unglamorous one. I'm sorry, Shad. But basically, the point being that, like, you have to start out with something to get there in the first place. Like, you don't get anywhere without having a vision first off. Like, where there is no vision, the people perish. It's like one of those nice old proverbs. And it's very true. If you don't have a vision of where you want to be, there's no way you're ever going to get anywhere. And people complain about that. And that's kind of one of those first things about having that desire and dream is. And there are plenty of books that you can find that talk about like, oh, dream big and this that thing, magic of thinking big. You've got what, Think and Grow Rich, that kind of like touches on more than just like your dreams. But Think and Grow Rich also goes into desire, and how having a desire that burns strong enough will motivate you to keep going. If you have something that you want to share with other people, then how strong is that desire? Is that desire something that's strong enough to keep you moving? Shad talks about how that's one of the things, is like something he desired, like developing characters brought him into actually being able to write. He talked about how at first in school he didn't want to do any writing or have anything to do with it or nothing. And then he kind of started getting into drawing because he thought maybe drawing would help him develop his characters, and doing comics would be a good way to do it. And he found out, well, I don't like drawing. And then he got into writing, and all of a sudden, like, he found writing as his most desired way of developing his characters, that he had his world building and everything. And he was able to actually do boring research, like spend hours on Wikipedia and stuff at a time doing all this research in order to better develop his characters and better develop his world. And how that desire and dream changed his attitude towards these certain activities. And it kind of leans that way into goals. I know for one thing, for me in particular, like when you're doing like YouTube or anything else, if you want to achieve growth, is an important part of that. And being able to grow your fan base and things like that will help you do that. I mean, there are books that help you develop plans and figure out what people really want and like so that you can better develop that as well. At the same time, you're creating your own niche and trying to develop that. And the goals give you kind of those milestones that help you meet those dreams and that vision. And as you accomplish those goals, you feel more fulfilled. Because if you're doing something else that someone else wants you to do, if you haven't had any input in it, there's no way that you can really feel accomplished or fulfilled. There's an extent to where you will, where you're getting your responsibilities done and things. But if you feel like that you're being taken away from something bigger, then that will detract from it. And Shad kind of talks a little bit about that, where it's like achieving these goals and fulfilling your responsibilities helps you feel more fulfilled, feel more productive and things that way. And it actually pushes you more forward. It's that feedback loop of endorphins that makes you feel better about yourself. And that's kind of one thing that I'm doing with YouTube and whatnot, is I've got different milestone goals, like hitting 200 subscribers as I've watched my numbers grow a little bit quicker than climbing to 100. That's another milestone that'll help me know that the things that I'm sharing actually matter to people. But not just that, it's that people are actually in some way being affected by it. And that, in a sense, is a feedback that gives me pride in knowing that I'm actually doing something to, in some way, help someone. Like last night on stream, when I was finishing up, I had someone ask about Linux gaming, and it's like, well, haven't quite gotten into it, but I mean, what's your opinion on it? What's the state of it? And it's like, well, and I went through and explained everything. I basically gave him recommendations of like what distributions might be good to start with, and added some caveats into it as well. Like, well, with this one, you're going to run into these issues and this, that, and the other. And he'd already watched some other videos from like Mudahar that talked a little bit about it. And it's like, well, Arch, that's the one that Muda uses, right? And it's like, yeah, that's the one. And like, these are basically based on it and this, that, and the other. But I didn't quite have that hand, and at the same time, other people having someone that they can lean on. When I was first getting into it, the resources were there, but they weren't as good and as prevalent as they are now. And kind of looping that back in, that's kind of been one of my goals, is to be able to help people learn, but also to help them become more self-sufficient, and that they can go and find those resources that they have. And these metrics and having goals against these metrics help me to determine how my growth is going and how much closer I am to getting to that goal. Because on top of that, Shad talks about like how you can take your dreams and your successes and turn them into something that you can make a living on. He talks about how even though if you don't become rich, if you are doing those things that add to your vision, you still live a more fulfilled life. And that's a successful life in and of itself. And even if I can hit the point to where I don't really have to think about, well, if I can, in essence, make a living and live off of it, then that means I can more easily dedicate more time to it without thinking about getting a second job or getting something else to pick up that will bring me an income for a little bit so that I can go a little bit longer. And he talks about that even if he didn't have everybody picking up his book, or he didn't sell like tons, he'd still feel fulfilled because he was able to do like something, and even it made a small impact. And for a lot of people, that's what matters, is having that small impact. Another thing he goes into is kind of like your learning and your smarts. Basically, are you growing your abilities? Are you learning? So obviously he's talking to a student body in an online session. So these students are in learning and growing in the book sense. And to some extent, book sense will get you so far and it can do so much for you. But at the same time, when you don't have that some of the street sense or common sense at the same time, then you lose out on some of that knowledge and some of that gap. And I know for me, so there are some things I know I still lack, but there's still a lot that I have learned along in the process and that I'm still learning. I've taken steps to try and like learn more and more, and sometimes I am very forgetful about it. But even if you're self-studying, he talks about how many free resources there are. You don't have to go to a university, because many universities now have their course content online for free. You can go to MIT's OpenCourseWare and you can literally sift through all of their content for free. So if I go to oh, come on. So I downloaded it a while ago, I think somewhere in here. So OpenCourseWare. So you've literally got MIT's like whole lineup of stuff that you could go through. So you could go through operating system engineering, and they've got the first. Oh. So if you go into here, we can, I think, actually. So you can literally just open it up in here, and you've got the whole course outline. You can go through the syllabus. This is all downloaded onto your machine. You've got the exercises and everything that you can go through. So we can go through the lecture notes. We can pull up the PDF, and it's got the PDF here. So you can go through, read through the notes. Yeah, you can't quite ask questions, but at the same time, there's a lot you can get from this. All at the same time. And that's actually really, really cool that you can do that, even. And that's basically the big thing that he kind of points to, is taking advantage of those resources that you have, and how he went through and looked at online resources, going to YouTube and such. I know my dad does the same thing. He goes to YouTube, he watches different lectures on like character development and so on, and other things. And my brother does the same thing for World War II. You have all these resources that you can go to that are literally at your fingertips, and people would rather watch TikToks all day rather than do that and enhance their skills. Although having the drive to do that does require, again, that desire and also the tenacity, ambition to do it. So he talks about also his friends that he had, or people that he knew that had all these awesome skills, were very brilliant, but never really got anywhere because they didn't have the ambition to do it or the tenacity to do it. They didn't have the drive to go further. They just kind of like went on talent. It's like those people that purely rely on their talent in order to get by. They're will come a point where they will run into a roadblock that won't be so easy that they can't rely on talent with, and then they'll just kind of back off and never touch it again. And that's a really sad case in where you could have had someone that could have like done so much, but they gave up because it wasn't as easy. And I know particularly for me, I've had a couple of moments where I've hit that roadblock and it's like, okay, and I end up backing off of it, but there are other resources that help me to understand that a bit better. So, like for example, with Game Boy programming, most people when they do Game Boy programming or ROM hacking, particularly for Pokemon, it's all in assembly. So you're basically having to manually manage a lot of these resources by yourself, and so you have to work with pointers and this, that, and the other. And it can be a challenge to wrap your head around when you're used to everybody talking about object-oriented programming. And for a bit, I did kind of back off some of the more in-depth assembly stuff. But at the same time, there were other resources that I picked up, like for C programming and so on, that I've been studying that has helped me to better grasp some of that stuff so that later on I can go back to it and work with it a lot easier. And that's the same thing that I've done with my whole journey in Linux. Is there's been something that I've come up against. It's like, well, I want to do this with my rice, but I don't know how to. I just can't wrap my brain around it at this moment because for whatever reason I've overloaded it or whatever, and so I back off for a little bit, and then either one way or another I end up accomplishing that goal. And that's kind of back where it comes back into play, where do you have a goal? And sometimes that learning these skills and learning new things leads to developing and accomplishing that goal and being able to do that. And that's kind of the big part of it, is like, do you have the ambition and the tenacity, the resilience to pick up and go back to it, or can you develop that tenacity and ambition, that resilience, to get pushed back, get humbled a little bit, and then go back and do it? And I think that's the big part for me. And that's why I've tried to persevere through like all the low slumps. Like, we can look at all of my content and we can just see, like, I look at what are the high points, what kind of is the big one, and I go back to those every so often. So like with web browsers, that seems to be a big one. There's some of the meme ones that are big ones, and I don't look at gift horse in the mouth, but I do take advantage of like some of that clickbait to try and drive traffic. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. But at the same time, it does help this grow, which does accomplish a goal. I'm not trying to go for the greatest fame. At the same time, there's an extent to where I have to learn to pull it off so that I can develop and get that feedback and better understand where I can put more effort in to grow and get even more. So you can see, even in, what is it, the last 48 hours, these have been my top 3. So some videos have dropped out, others still stick around for quite a while. Like my Pine Phone videos, those are some larger ones. But that's the important thing, is like, I'm trying to develop the skills, figure out where I can fit things in, but also trying new things and having the bravery to try out something new. You can see that there are some cases where the like to dislike ratio is just like not happy. But at the same time, that tells me that there's feedback and that there are people that are actually interacting. And then that helps me in many ways to figure out what works. And it's not the same across platforms. So if I go to PeerTube, some of the things are slightly different. The way that analytics are grabbed is slightly different, but I can kind of see where the concentration of things are and how much traction I'm getting in each one. So even in spite of like not organizing things very well still, I still have some traction on some of the main stuff. But again, back to his point is like, those are basically the traits that you need in order to accomplish something. And some people look at it like, I can't accomplish that because the market is very limited. And it's like, you're working on the internet. There are always going to be people that are going to look for something that you do. Like, if there are furries on the internet and there are people like that into that content, if there are people that like Dwarf Fortress and enjoy it the way it is in its janky UI matrixy state, then there is guaranteed to be someone that'll appreciate your content in some form or fashion, no matter how you carve out that niche. And there will come a point to where you will be able to make enough to where you can make a halfway living on it, even on Linux stuff. I mean, you can look at Brody Robertson, you can look at Luke Smith and Mental Outlaw, and I'm sure that they make some sort of decent income from all the different income sources that are basically from their one thing of making content. It's just, you have to carve it out and then most importantly, have the ambition to do it and tenacity and resilience to get back up and keep going. And then you have to have the will to develop your skills further so that you can become better at what you do, get the resources and tools that you need. But been a long blab. I mean, if you want to continue in chat, the links are in the description. You can find my Matrix, I think, yeah, Matrix, Gilded, Steam Chat even, for some reason. Oh, Matrix Discord. I haven't really used IRC all that much. XMPP. And all those chat links. You can find the shill links down there as well for like that kind of a thing, if that's your thing. I don't require it, but it's very much appreciated. Like I said, that's part of my goal, is to be able to make some of this so that I can more easily focus on it and not have to think about getting something else to support me. And there have been various people that have like sent me money over the last few years, like throughout my time streaming over the last few years. I've like had like ups and downs and things like that, and it's been awesome and crazy all at the same time. And I know it seems like I haven't grown much. I felt like I started all over with the streaming after leaving the IRS, but as I've watched some of the stuff change, I'm very grateful for those of you that have been around through the thick and thin of it. But I'll see you all in the next one. You can scream at me in the comments about like what's wrong with what I said or why you think communism great or whatever, but have a good one.